Hey everyone. Happy March 1st. Happy March. And Women's History Month starts today. So I hope you all had a positive, resilient February in the world. There's been a lot going on. Wishing you all health and wealth. As you know, my name is Shaquana. I have a page that I launched dedicated to books, arts, and literature. And I decided to do a series focused on Michelle Obama's latest book, Overcoming. So this book is for those of you who are new to the series, this is Michelle's third book, and she wrote Becoming, which was awesome. That was like around 2018, 2019 that came out. And then The Light We Carry came out in 2022, 2023. These years are flying. And this book, Overcoming, is a like a supplement to The Light We Carry. So it's a way to take the lessons in The Light We Carry and incorporate them into our life. And it's a book kind of about softness and emotional well-being. You know, it can be tough to live a soft life in a harsh world, but she gives her life story as well as some tools that have helped her along the way. So I have been going live weekly, going into the different topics of the book, and I'm inviting people to order it. Like I said, the book is interactive, so it's not something that you want to get from the library. I usually am very pro library, but this book is something that you want to own because there's a lot of prompts for journaling and reflecting. And I think could be great if you join to sharing some of what you have found out about yourself as you start to build this emotional well-being and resilience. You don't have to buy the book in order to participate and join my lives and listen in, because I'm doing a review of the different topics from my perspective. So I introduce it, I'll reference the book, but I also go in more depth in it so that we can have a rich conversation about the topic. So we first started off last week with the first component, and this is all about fear. She calls it being comfortably afraid. And oh, that I felt was a very relevant topic. All of us deal with fears. Something that I appreciate, I call her Auntie Shell, that she differentiates in the book is the difference between soft fears and harder fears. So she acknowledges that a workbook is not going to help us with those hardcore fears and challenges that we all are dealing with in life. This is more about those abstract fears, invisible fears, or those fears that are almost kind of like things we make up that can paralyze us, that it can make us so scared to take the next step, to live a full life, to be bold and courageous. And this discussion today is about how we can overcome that, how we can understand that fear is, we're going to have it until we die. So there's a differentiation for those harder fears. um, the suggestion is we get help. So if you're dealing with any of those hardcore fears, you know, make sure that you reach out. You're not alone in the world. Look for ways to deal with those and don't overwhelm yourself, because you can only deal with problems. We can't fix every aspect of our life at the same time. But these softer fears should be faced and addressed, like I said, so they don't paralyze us. And we want to build capacity with fears to be comfortably afraid. So you almost get to a point where you realize fear isn't the boogeyman. it can be helpful to us as animals and humans. It's a survival tool to give us data on what we should do, but too much, too little is not good. So what we would like to do is build the capacity to understand that we're going to have fear forever, but we can be comfortably afraid. Yes. So I want to stop and shift a minute. We're talking about fear, but this week we lost a wonderful woman, Black woman of America, artist, and I think she deserves her flowers. So I want to give a shout out and a reverence to Roberta Flack. So she is our overcoming hero for this episode. And I was looking for some facts to share with her. Born in 1937, died in 2025, 88 regal years. As a child, she played piano and organ, earning a full music scholarship to Howard University, and later went back to teach music before she was able to launch her career. And there was a quote that I came across by Reverend Jesse Jackson, and he called her socially relevant and politically unafraid. So how amazing is it that we're talking about being comfortably afraid, and I was able to make this connection that Roberta lived a life of being politically unafraid. She founded later on the Roberta Flack School of Music at the Hyde Leadership Charter School in the Bronx, providing an innovative and inspiring music education program to underprivileged students free of charge. If you haven't done so, there was a documentary done about Roberta Flack by American Masters, PBS, a few years back. Watch it. It was really inspirational. And it was part of the reason why, when I read about her passing, I wanted to celebrate her because on page 40 of the book, Miss Auntie Shell makes the reference of examples that she she people that she met, whether they were world leaders, family members, artists that she witnessed that they were afraid, yet they pushed through that fear and made the changes that they needed to make in life. So, just wanted to reflect on Roberta as someone who pushed boundaries and continued to live a life of fullness. So back to this discussion about coexisting with fear. I'm going to throw it out there. Anyone in out there in the ether, and if you're joining in the future, you can still leave your comments. So one of the prompts was, when was the last time you felt afraid? And what actions did you take or not take as a result of fear? So I can share, and I put this in my journal with everything that had been going on recently with airlines. I was really afraid. I had to go take a flight last week to see my daughter perform down in University of Alabama, and I live in upstate New York. So I had to get on a number of planes to go there and a number of planes to come back. And I had some family members that I also knew were traveling. And I was afraid of that. I felt a sense of fear. I know that flying is considered probably the safest method of transportation, but it was still a fearful thing because there's been so many incidences, and it seems as if it might be the algorithm on my phone, but now any issue regarding a flight, I'm getting an alert about. Now I think I'm going to have to tweak my phone because I don't think I need to know of every single issue. But anyone else out there want to share the last time you were afraid? What was something that you felt afraid of? And how successful the prompt in the book on page 41 is, how successfully did you face that fearful moment you described? What actions did you take or not take? The action I took was I traveled anyway. And I contemplated not traveling. I did. I contemplated not taking this trip, but I would have been missing out on seeing my child perform her first theatrical performance at the university. And it's not an easy feat to get casted. It's always a competitive. There's so many talented children, college students that audition for these roles, and then they cast it. She's a young Black artist, striving to make it as a performing artist, and I wanted to share and help her feel supported. So it did mean a lot to her and me and my family for to be there. And that morning when I was leaving out, my sons, I just held them tighter. I hugged them tighter. That was an action I took because I know that nothing is promised to us. And look, even if I got in the car and drove to the grocery store to pick something up or decided to go to the bank to get a letter notarized, something can happen in the bank. We know this. So you have to be comfortably afraid, but we can't allow the fears to stop us. So I was proud that I didn't, and I had a safe flight. As a matter of fact, I can say not only was it safe, it was pleasurable. I flew into Florida for the layover, Fort Lauderdale. And as I was landing, I got to look out the window and see a stunning coastal view. And I'm sun deprived. I've been up in upstate New York. We've had a very cold, brutal winter, lots of snow every other day. So getting that view just for that moment to see the sand and the water, it was a sight for sore eyes. So I appreciated it. I was grateful that I decided to take this trip, even though I felt a lot of anxiety around traveling. And I was able to you know, enjoy it. I think also though, the fear, just me being a little more transparent and vulnerable. Whenever I take trips, I think about what could happen, but it also makes me feel like what I would leave behind. And I think one of the things that those feelings are telling me is just kind of making sure that my spaces are less cluttered. And that's something that I've thought about for many years, is, you know, feeling like I wouldn't want to burden those I love with a lot of stuff. So I think that we should examine our fears so that we can know what that information is trying to tell us, because it may be trying to tell us that we need to make some changes in our life. So there's more to this that I think is really some good intel. She talks about, Auntie Shell, on page 42, abstract fears. These are fears that are not necessarily real, may not be real things that are happening in our life, but there's stuff that we may drum up, and they can really put a chokehold on our progress. Some of the examples she lists are fears of embarrassment, accidents, aging, failure, criticism, emotional harm. And I'll even elaborate some of the ones that I have dealt with. The accident thing is one, not having, being, or doing enough in any given situation. One of the other ones that gets me is the running out of time. I've been feeling that feeling for years and wasting time. So she invites you to circle the type of abstract fears that you hold as a way to, again, get closer to it so that you can make sense of it. And all of this is a way to lead towards being able to coexist with fears. So there is a quote that I really appreciated in the book where she says, "Hello, it's you again. Thanks for showing up, for making me so alert, but I see you. You're no monster to me." So even though she has some very big life choices and decisions, going for first lady and campaigning against in a world where not everyone appreciated her, maybe even dealing with threats, harsh judgment, and criticism. She had come up with some mechanisms to not talk herself out of success and talk herself out of risks. So that's one of the statements that she makes is in it, but it's all in a journey of learning how to coexist with the fear that we had. And in pages, 46 and a couple of other pages, now we're getting to the tools for overcoming fear. And one of them is to become acquainted with your fearful mind. So that's where what comes in with identifying the things that, with no judgment, come to you and that you're fearful of. And another is learning about the nuts and bolts of what you're afraid of. So that is something that I do, and it does help. Once again, like take the flying, for example. I started looking at the safety of flying, even in the midst of, the terrible tragedy that just happened 2 weeks ago. It was two crashes back to back. I did research on overall the safety of flying, and I found out that it still is a safe mechanism for traveling. I've done this with other things where I'll learn about the nuts and bolts of what I'm afraid of, and it does help to calm that racing mind. Another way that you can deal with this is to find books and resources on how to deal with fear. Years ago, I had a friend named Helen. Hi, Helen, if you're out there. She was one of the first people that talked candidly about therapy. Like it's more common now for people to have therapists, but she had a therapist years ago, and she used to always tell me about this book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it's by this psychologist named Susan Jeffers. I went on her page. I was looking for some video clips to include, but some of it was a little too long-winded for this episode. But if you're interested, she seems to be one of the gurus of fear. And I know that that book really helped my friend Helen. And I looked on YouTube and saw quite a few people put together videos about it. It's one of those old school self-help resources. So if you are interested, look into that, get the book. She also has a lot of other resources on her website. But I do think it's helpful to find out how to tackle fear. And in the last episode, I shared stuff around like moods and how not to let your moods, when we were talking about living, we were talking about small power. One of the things we talked about was how our moods just can go from one extreme to another. And being able to witness our moods and not let them control us is empowering. Well, this is part of it too. So this topic of fear goes a little deeper into it, but this is all about we are living in a very unstable time, and anything can happen at any time. We need to be able to have a square to stay on so that despite the different challenges, we're not going, all over the place. So, yes. One of the other suggestions that Auntie Shell offered was to develop a mantra. This is another old school tool, tried and true for helping face fears. I was looking at that and then, in the journal, you'll see a space for you writing your mantra that helps you tackle negative thoughts in a fearful mind. And I realized that I had one. So mine is, she'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. And producer, do you have that image up? Could you put that up? Yeah. This is I like this image. I saw it. It was published by Essence Magazine. They did a feature on Black women who were cowgirls. I realized that that was my mantra. I was driving one day. This was maybe, could be 10 years ago, a little less than that. I was driving through a snowstorm and on the highway, and I got fearful. And I needed to keep going. There was nothing else I could do. That song came to my head. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll ride in 6 black horses when she comes. I just kept saying it. And it was helping me get through this fearfulness. I think the thought of being on a horse and going through, I wasn't even really that familiar with the song. I did do some research later on and found out that it had some roots to a Negro spiritual. And it seems like all roads come back in America to them Negro spirituals. But it's a mantra that I have. So I invite you to develop one for yourself to help with those fearful thoughts. In the next couple of pages, 50 to 51, Auntie Shell also talked about a strategy for dealing with fear is to get educated. So as I mentioned, these are all tools for overcoming fear. So on the pages 50 to 51, there's spaces to journal about fears with an invitation to learn more about what you're fearful of. So let's say you are putting off getting screened because you are worried about the results. So you might be behind in getting some type of healthcare screening. You can look up the incidence rates of whatever it is that you're afraid of. And you can even look into the treatments. And it may not be that you're going to deal with any type of diagnosis, but just knowing that there's technology and treatments, it could help you feel a little bit better about that, or knowing that it's a very low chance of whatever it is you're fearful of. Now, I know that when it comes to health, sometimes Googling can have us in a chokehold. It could have us really even more fearful. But that's just an example. You can take pretty much any topic that you're fearful of: public speaking, addressing something with you, a financial matter, something with your self-esteem, and there's information out there that can help you clear cut to help ease the the fear. So becoming knowledgeable, gaining competencies, and gaining confidence in particular areas can be a way to help. And that was something that Auntie Shell said, that it was like a way that she and her mother addressed the fear. So that getting that knowledge. Something that was also raised in page 52 is how she, Auntie Shell talked about her grandfathers and how they lived, as Black men in Chicago during the era. They overcame discrimination and traveling, the Great Migration, pushing through Jim Crow, coming up to the North where was still a lot of limitations, legalized, redlining, and all of these harsh realities that caused them to maybe have internalized fears or limitations that were kind of apparent in the way that they parented. Like she said that one of her grandfathers just didn't trust white people. He couldn't open up to them because he had experienced so many negative life experiences with them. So these types of things put limits on their lives. And I had just read this great book by it was a collaboration between I think it's called "You Are Your Greatest Your Greatest Solution." I'll put the name of it in the chat, but it was a collaboration between the sister that created the Me Too movement, Tanana Burke, and Brene Brown. And they share a lot of intimate stories about how our people have been impacted by, life here in America, and how it impacts our vulnerability and our ability to. That particular book is more on shame, but it's kind of all related. So what I'm getting at here is not only do we have, as Black Indigenous people, the experience of fear as just humans, as creatures, because of the experiences that have happened here on this land, escaping slavery, wars, settling new towns, Reconstruction, modern day issues, drugs and prison pipelines, all the stuff that we have to navigate. Even if we don't deal with it, it's environmental. It can make us fearful. It can have its real fears, and it can impact our abstract fears. And in the book that I had just read, it was a whole thing. One of the mothers talked about just when her sons leave the house and get in the cars, and then she knows they're going to be driving. The adrenaline and the different emotions that it puts us through are real things. So we have to really acknowledge that and continue to look at how we can not let those things stop us. Driving, I know, like I said, for me, it's not just the traveling and flying, it's even taking trips across the country and driving in certain areas and just feeling uneasy about what I can expect with that. So I just want to acknowledge that and have a safe, soft space for the fact that we have real fears and we also have these abstract fears. And one of the other reasons why this was a very important point that Auntie Shell made was the more we learn and we understand that, it also helps us to have some compassion maybe for those previous generations, for the ways in which they coped, because sometimes we may feel judgmental in the decisions and choices that they made at the time, without really understanding, because we weren't in those shoes, why they made the decisions and choices that they made and how fear impacted that, and how some of the freedoms that we have now, and we are still fighting for them, but we do have some agency that our forefathers and mothers didn't have, giving the reverence and gratefulness to them, but also just kind of understanding that this it's it's step by step, and then our children and theirs are going to have certain things, and they have it now, and there's differences with how they feel they can move in the world and how we have moved in the world. Like some of us who are maybe boomers or in the X's, it's different for the millennials and Z's. I think it'll help us understand one another more instead of constantly having these judgy type of discussions where we're pointing fingers against each of the generations. Um, so there was a beautiful quote in the book on page 57 where she says, the challenge in leading a big life becomes trying to find ways to protect your dreams and your drive, to remain tough without being overly guarded, to stay nimble and open to growth, allowing others to see you for who you are. And I think that's a great combination of what we're trying to do with fear. So here's another strategy that she talks about. She calls it armor up. So we talked about some of the tools. So far, remember, one is becoming acquainted with fears. The next one is getting educated about whatever it is you're fearful of. Another one was developing a mantra. And another one is having armor. Armor, a natural defense for handling fear, is to create practices, traits, and characteristics that can help you feel confident. And it's a way to self protect and can ease fear. So in the book, Auntie Shell, she says that some of her armors are dressing well. Many of us women like to dress nice and have our hair and makeup and all of that on point, and it's a way to self-protect. Being prepared is another one for her, being punctual and showing humor. I think one of my fears is kindness. And I don't like that saying, kill them with kindness, though, because I feel like that denotes kindness coming from a place of phoniness. And that's not what I'm talking about when I say kindness. For me, it's actually a way for me to like feel connected to the way that I was raised. Because when I think about the way that I was raised by my family, um, my my mother and grandmother, my aunts and uncles, and the neighborhoods that I lived in the 70s in Queens Village, my friends and their parents, there was just so much kindness extended to me. And people just like looking out for me and we were looking out for each other. And I noticed that, and it wasn't so much about these real materialistic type of wants on the other end of it. It was the culture of life. So sometimes when I'm just taking a moment to be kind and work or and give, or if someone asks me to show up, it makes me feel nostalgic. It makes me feel like I'm retaining that value, that familiar cultural value that we've had as a people, that sometimes it feels like it's decaying, and it may not be, but certain things are getting more emphasized than others. So that is an armor for me. That's one of my armors. I like humor too. I like that one as well. So yeah, what have any of you out there thought about your armors? Armors are it can be helpful. I have a there's an image here of Sheila. Girl, you got me on fear, a generational type of fear that prevents us from talking and passing down real ways to live and avoiding hard mistakes. Yes, I've had a lot of conversations with about this, and it's true, Sheila, because in a way, sometimes we get frustrated about that because we're like, why didn't our family members or tell us about stuff that they went through? Because, we don't want to keep making the same mistakes, or if there's a way that they were overcame something and they could share it, wouldn't it be better? And I don't have a perfect answer for that because I see both sides at this point. I have an understanding of why maybe some of them it might have been too painful for them to talk about some of these things. That may be the way that they self-protected. But at the same time, if we don't share in this information, it does prevent us from it can be one of the ways that it prevents us from moving on. So if we can figure out ways to like broach these conversations, if they can be productive. And another thing that I've witnessed is inviting these conversations to be honest, because I notice that sometimes people feel like they need to like spin stuff and overly romanticize something instead of just being honest about what happened, share the failures, the tragedies, the mistakes, and not feel like they have to, sugarcoat stuff. That's another thing that we see. And it, in a way, it happens because of the way that we even learn about history. Most of the time, when we learn history in school, we get these real sanitized versions of people. Even people that have done wonderful things for humanity and history we only get a real flat, one dimensional view of their life. And then it makes us think that we have to live like that as well. And we know that that's not how life or humanity is. It's part of the reason why I love to read, because I feel like you get more dimension when you read. And I like reading historical fiction because I get the fiction, I get it's not a real story, but it is because the context is real. And it seems like the way that they're written, you're able to see more humanity than some of the other mediums of art, like film and movies. So yeah, I really appreciate that comment, Sheila, about generational conversations. And as we move forward, and we can be the aunties and the parents that keep it more real with our kids and people around. But then on the other hand, they have to also have an ear and be willing to hear it. So it's both sides, with relationships. And giving a shout out to Mary Field. She's one of the people, AKA Stagecoach Mary. When we were looking for images for armor, she comes to mind because she was a very strong woman of the Wild West who did a lot as a Black woman. So she's deserving of her history. And if you don't know much about her, I invite you to go do some research on Mary Fields. And so in the last point, I guess I already made this point, and so I don't want to be redundant. It's about reverence and grace. And it really is, it's pages 62 to 63 of the book where She mentions it's easy to be critical of one's forebears for their fears and their choices, to judge them for their compromises or hold them responsible for changes they were unable to make. The amount of armor being worn by an older generation will often appear rigid and outmoded to younger people, but it's important to consider the context. So we just talked about that. What I forgot to mention with armor is I didn't I didn't mention the negatives. So we want to armor is a self protector. It's okay to have it. Take some time to think about what your armor is. Be mindful of being too um, hiding behind it and having it be a mask, because then you can end up becoming rigid, phony, or just not, you may not even recognize yourself. So, armor up to an extent, but you don't want to let that armor harden you. If you're in an environment, say you go to a party and you're like, I'm a little nervous about going into this party. I'm going to make sure that I am looking good. So that's good. You smelling great, you're looking good. You arrive at the party, but you're so self-conscious about how you look that you don't even enjoy the music. you, you don't want to sit and dance or maybe talk to someone. Somebody might pay you a compliment and you're in your head, and you know what I mean? And that's what I mean about like the armor. It can get too extreme, and then you're not in the moment and you're not able to just really just live. So that the armor can help us, but don't let it take it too serious. Just let it be something that kind of protects you, like some like clothing, and you don't have to use your armor. I mean, if you think about it, when you see people with armor, a shield, a knife, they're not just having that constantly. They put it up if they need it. It's there if you need it, but it's not every minute of the day you're using armor. And we can get caught up in that. So, yeah, so that's what I mean about armor. Have it, use it as a tool. So, yeah, so in summary, pages 64 to 67 kind of summarize this discussion about being comfortably afraid. And if you do end up getting the journal, you'll be able to, there's a habit tracker. So you'll be able to, over the next month, track the steps we took. Did you identify fears as real or tangible? So whenever something came into your mind that was fearful, did you look at it from that perspective? If you did identify it as a real fear, did you investigate some solutions to help you work through the fear? Have you adopted a mantra and used it when you were feeling afraid, and has that helped you? And lastly, have you realized that fear will remain with us, and this is a journey? So that's something that is something that probably comes and goes with life, like mood management. Realizing that it will remain with us, it's part of life. It's here to protect us, but it shouldn't paralyze us. So we do need to be brave. It's another reason why I was this month, I am inspired to read about different women warriors, because I feel like I'm a woman warrior through this neo time, neo America time, 2025. So, looking at the warriors of the past, indigenous women of this land, of the African diaspora, and other parts of the world, other time periods, how they were brave, how they had fears and they faced them, and they helped their communities, their families, their societies. So I'm looking for them stories, and I'm going to delve into them this month as another way to help empower me to try to stay bold and courageous during these challenging times. So that wraps the Comfortably Afraid module. I think it's a great one because fear is really something that can keep us down, and it doesn't have to. So if anyone is out there, like I said, I pick up the book, um, go through that module. Sheila says, I feel we misuse anger and representation as an armor out here. Yes. Yes. I have seen that happen. The anger, it can be an armor. And it's an emotion. It's a relevant, there's reasons for it. There's reasons why we have the anger, but it's a time and a place. It's also choosing one's battles, because we do have legitimate battles we need to be angry about. How do we channel those things? So for example, there's a lot of policy changes that have been happening with DEI being taken away or chipped away, which has been actually happening for the last several years. Yet, locally, how often do we go to the school boards, the town hall meetings, and really put a fire, take that anger and put a fire under the leaders? In the city that I live in, the school situation is abysmal, and it's been for years. And I think part of it is that as parents and as community members, we're not holding the leaders accountable enough. We don't need DEI to do that. We have power. We can push for better policies and educational practices. And we can do this with our environment too, knowing and understanding our food supply and our water. When there is a neighborhood, they say, and if there's a broken window and there's no one really monitoring the broken window or fixing it, people feel like they can do carte blanche because nobody's watching it. How will these decisions change if we're showing up to these town hall meetings and taking the anger that we have about what's happening and really localizing it? Being there at the meetings, asking questions, reviewing the documents, pushing for changes in the documents as a collective. And it can be a way that we challenge these problems. So the anger, we can use it in a productive way, and take it, instead of hardening us, making our blood pressure and our livers and our hearts harden. We can take that anger and channel it. Yeah. So I appreciate that comment, Sheila. So that wraps our discussion today, unless we have any other comments out there. And like I said, feel free to comment in the future. Our next discussion is going to be next Saturday, and we'll be talking about source code. And that is, I'm really interested in exploring more about that. That's like our individuality, our inner selves, and how we tap into that for fuller lives. So yeah, if you haven't done so already, just a reminder, trying to figure out a way to get this. There it is. Overcoming. We are overcoming. And I hope you all have a great rest of your Saturday and enjoy your week. And we'll see you next Saturday to talk about source code.